I knew I was finished the moment my boss, Lana Mercer, called my entire department a luxury we can't afford during a transitional quarter. It was barely 10 minutes into the Monday morning all hands, and I already felt like I was watching my own professional obituary being read aloud, minus the flowers or sympathy pastries. Her face filled the wall-sized monitor from the San Francisco headquarters, expression set in that polished smirk executives perfect after too many leadership seminars. Her hair didn't move when she nodded. Her voice dripped with that faux warm HR tone that pretends to be collaborative but lands somewhere between threat and sermon. Then came the slide. Alignment directives for future-facing teams. I could practically hear the trademark symbol. She announced that starting next week, all staff would return to full-time on-site collaboration. No warning, no discussion, just a decree wrapped in buzzwords. My team looked stunned. I just blinked. For 3 consecutive quarters, my predictive logistics AI pilot had outperformed every sales projection this company, NextVantage Systems, had posted. And I'd done most of that work from my basement office in Seattle, wearing a robe and fuzzy socks printed with tiny raccoons. But apparently, results now mattered less than visibility. Then came the gut punch. All R&D prototypes and early-stage concepts, she said, must be logged into our shared internal repository. Full source files, technical notebooks, timestamps, everything. My office will be reviewing origin points for patent filing consolidation effective immediately. That wasn't collaboration. That was quiet, bureaucratic theft disguised as synergy. I felt my molars grind. Because if you think patent consolidation sounds harmless, you've never seen a VP parachute in from a rival firm with an NDA loophole and a portable drive full of ambition. So I unmuted my mic. Calmly. Can I get clarification? I asked, on whether this policy applies to projects developed outside of work hours. She smiled that shark flat smile. If you're developing anything aligned with NextVantage's roadmap, Aaron, we'll assume it falls under company scope. I asked again. Even if I used no NextVantage time, resources, or personnel? Her laugh came sharp and thin. If you don't like the new policies, Aaron, you can just resign and go. The room went dead silent. Even our junior dev, Paul, the guy who still typed like he was sending Morse code, froze mid-keystroke. And me? I smiled. Thanks for the exit strategy. I closed my laptop, unplugged my second monitor, and breathed in the faint scent of betrayal mixed with vanilla creamer. Then I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked out like I was heading to brunch instead of detonating 6 years of loyalty. No scene, no yelling, just one cardboard box in my arms and the sound of sneakers squeaking against polished floor tiles. Sophie, my mentee, chased me to the elevator. Aaron, what's happening? Where are you going? I looked at her, steady, calm. Stay, watch, learn. I didn't cry, didn't slam a door, didn't even leave a dramatic email for HR. I just walked out, sunlight hitting me like stage lights. In the trunk of my car waited a small envelope, already stamped and sealed, addressed to Mark Ellison, General Counsel, NextVantage Systems. Inside wasn't a resignation. It was documentation. Proof that the AI-driven logistics engine they were about to launch next fiscal year had been built by me. Not metaphorically, legally. I'd been crafting that system for a year outside the company's scope, on my own dime, own equipment, with verifiable witnesses and digital trails so clean, even an intern could follow them to court. They thought I'd sulk, that I'd post a bitter goodbye on LinkedIn about new beginnings. But I don't bruise easily. I build quietly. And when you try to steal what I've built, I don't fight. I file. I didn't take much. Just the mug shaped like a penguin, 2 notebooks filled with sketches and sarcastic doodles, and a wooden plaque Sophie had made that read Queen of Workarounds. I left the keyboard I'd bought myself. The company one clicked like tap-dancing termites. Let Lana keep it all. She'd need comfort when the fire started. Before leaving, I slipped that envelope into the outgoing mail tray on HR's counter. White, standard issue, sealed tighter than a submarine hatch. The label read, "To General Counsel. Confidential." Inside was the fuse. Sophie caught up again by the doors, voice shaking. "Are you really leaving?" I smiled. "Stay. Observe." The elevator doors shut. Outside, the parking lot shimmered with heat. I opened my trunk, placed the box beside a second, identical envelope. Yes, backup, stamped and ready, because paranoia is just experience with better branding. Then I started the car and drove, not home, but toward Harbor Point Workspace, a co-working hub wedged between a dentist's office and a vape shop. Not glamorous, but it had two things I needed: anonymity and a notary named Phil who never asked questions, as long as the paperwork was neat and the coffee was hot. Phil looked up from his chipped countertop, the smell of burnt espresso and printer ink hanging in the air. "Morning, Aaron," he said with a grin. "Looks like someone's got a big day." "You could say that," I replied, sliding a manila folder toward him. "Let's make it official." Inside were 3 provisional patent declarations, each notarized, time-stamped, and pre-registered for secure upload. Phil checked the pages with the calm precision of a man who'd seen everything from divorce filings to startup dissolutions. He stamped them, one by one, the sound echoing like distant thunder. Then he uploaded encrypted copies to the secure archive server we'd set up a month earlier. The whole process took 10 minutes, but it felt like I'd just built a fortress around my sanity. When he finished, Phil slid the folder back across the counter and locked the case containing the originals. "All signed, sealed, and logged," he said. "You're covered tighter than Fort Knox." "Good," I said, exhaling. Because what I'd just filed were 3 provisional patents: Adaptive Predictive Routing Engine, Dynamic Load Balancing Matrix, and Spectre Logic Protocol, a silent back-end AI that would have made NextVantage's logistics platform its crown jewel. Would have, because those designs were now legally entirely mine. Every line of code, every diagram, every timestamp was traced to my personal hardware and off-hours development. My documentation trail was longer than a CVS receipt and twice as painful for whoever had to read it. I had built the system on my own machines, in my own home, financed with my own money. And, thanks to an NDA clause that Lana herself had rewritten during her efficiency reform, NextVantage's claim to pre-existing employee IP had been conveniently loosened. In her eagerness to consolidate power, she'd cracked the wall. I just widened it. As I left Harbor Point, my phone buzzed. Text from Sophie. "Lana just asked if you were at lunch. Should I say yes?" I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the lake, parked beneath a maple tree, and watched a family of ducks fight over a discarded bagel. I wasn't angry anymore. I was surgical. For years, I'd been the quiet fixer, the person who made broken things function while executives collected applause, the invisible architect behind every team breakthrough. Now, for the first time, I was the ghost in their machine. The first sketch of my algorithm hadn't been born in a lab. It started in a diner off I-90 11 months earlier, drawn on a napkin beside cold pancakes and a refill of bad coffee from a waitress named Cheryl who kept calling me Un. A cluster of loops, nodes, and arrows scribbled in black ink. That was the start. Not elegant, but it worked. I hadn't built it out of revenge. Back then, I still believed NextVantage wanted innovation. I'd pitched them the idea. A predictive routing engine that adapted to environmental shifts, historical data, and supply bottlenecks in real time. Too complex, they said. Too deep tech. The sales team wouldn't understand it, so they shelved it. I didn't. I went home, powered up my personal laptop, a separate network, no corporate access, no overlap, and started coding, line by line, function by function. I logged every commit, encrypted each backup, and stored redundant copies in cold cloud storage. I even emailed digest summaries to a private account tied to a name variation I'd used back in grad school. EC Row, just for plausible deniability. Once a month, I met with Ravi Patel, an old college friend turned adjunct professor, who verified my progress as a third-party witness. We notarized every update. Some people call that paranoia. I call it insurance. 6 months later, the skeleton of the routing engine was alive. I tested it with open-source freight data and mock simulations. The efficiency scores humiliated NextVantage's own platform. That's when I scheduled a meeting, not with management, but with Eliza Trent, a patent attorney who'd once taken on defense contractors and won. She looked like someone who used cease and desists as breakfast reading. I handed her everything: logs, witness statements, backups, timestamps, even a recording of me coding with a local radio station playing in the background for time verification. Eliza flipped through the files, nodded once, and said, "These are yours, all of it." Within 2 weeks, she filed the paperwork. 3 separate provisional patents under Aaron Cole. No corporate language, no vague ownership phrasing that could let NextVantage sneak in through a back door. Triple time stamped, archived, notarized. Overkill? Maybe. But I sleep better when my armor's bulletproof. I didn't tell anyone at work. Why would I? It wasn't for them. Then Lana Mercer arrived. Fast-talking, metrics-obsessed, allergic to humility. Within 3 months, she'd announced NextVantage's Next-Gen Logistics Intelligence Suite. The name? Project Vertex. I almost choked on my lunch. Because Vertex wasn't inspired by my work. It was my work. I remember the first time I saw the teaser for Project Vertex. It popped up on the internal portal like a victory banner, revolutionizing predictive logistics with AI intelligence. The words felt like a punch. Every feature listed was a mirror of my architecture. The phrasing, the model behaviors, even the example graphs. They were mine. They hadn't just stolen the idea. They'd lifted the bones right out of my work. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then I recognized one of the variable names from my early tests. No one else would have used it. Cinderloop. That was my personal label, a tiny Easter egg I used to trace replication. My heart sank. They were using my core code. What Lana didn't know, what nobody inside NextVantage realized, was that the moment their engineers compiled that demo, they'd stepped onto a legal minefield. My patents were filed, time-stamped, and sealed. Every time they ran Vertex, they were validating my claim with fresh evidence. But I didn't storm back into the office. I didn't threaten anyone. I waited, because I've learned in this world, silence cuts deeper than outrage. 3 weeks later, Lana held another all hands. She stood under the company logo, bright and loud, talking about strategic disruption and AI-native scalability. She promised investors that Vertex would redefine logistics efficiency forever. She smiled like she'd invented oxygen. I watched the recording later that night, my laptop screen reflecting her overconfident grin. They were weeks away from unveiling the system at the Northwest Tech Frontier Expo, a major event with media, investors, and competitors all watching. What they didn't realize was that their crown jewel was built on intellectual property they didn't own, and I had the receipts to prove it. I didn't sleep that night, not from anger, from focus, the kind of clarity that comes when every piece finally locks into place. The next morning, I called Eliza. "They're using it," I said flatly. She didn't sound surprised. "Do you have proof?" "Enough to write a documentary?" I said. "Then let's make them watch it." Over the next few days, Eliza and I compiled a dossier. Timestamps, Git logs, device IDs, notarized progress reports, even screen recordings of my early prototypes. We compared everything to NextVantage's public materials. The overlaps were unmistakable. down to function names, algorithmic triggers, and logic trees. When we were done, she drafted the first shot across the bow, a cease and desist notice that didn't threaten. It informed. The letter was clean, factual, devastating. It cited patent interference statutes, outlined the overlapping structures, and included annotated screenshots. It wasn't emotional. It was surgical. We scheduled it to land in NextVantage's general counsel inbox at 8 a.m. Monday. A timing. Eliza called maximum discomfort hour. By 9:30, my phone buzzed with a message from a friend still inside. Lana's been pulled into legal. They're freaking out. You might want popcorn. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Later, I heard from Sophie what had gone down. Lana had laughed at first. Actually laughed. She told legal, "She's bluffing. Provisional patents don't mean anything." Bless her heart. Because at 10:15 a.m., the second letter arrived, straight from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, confirming 3 provisional patents filed under Aaron Cole had been logged and accepted 5 weeks earlier. That single confirmation flipped everything. Patent interference laws were now in effect. Any continued use or display of my work would constitute willful infringement. That word, willful, is nuclear in IP law. It means damages can triple. It means intent. By lunch, the tone at NextVantage had shifted from arrogance to panic. Internal emails flew like confetti. Someone accidentally CC'd the entire R&D chain on a message titled, "What do you mean we can't use our own code?" Sophie texted again an hour later. "They're locking down Git repos. People are whispering your name like it's Voldemort." I told her to breathe. Just stay. Watch. Learn. By mid-afternoon, a Reddit thread appeared under the tech gossip forum. Ex-engineer slaps employer with patent interference notice. Vertex demo in danger? The story hadn't gone public yet, but the embers were glowing. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and finally exhaled. The pieces were moving. NextVantage had built its showcase around stolen architecture. And now that showcase was collapsing from within, all because one quiet engineer decided to stop being invisible. Inside NextVantage, the panic spread faster than caffeine at a hackathon. Engineers scrambled through version histories, managers barked into headsets, and every Slack channel from R&D to legal lit up like a Christmas tree. Half the company was trying to figure out how much of Vertex was borrowed. The other half was pretending they'd never heard my name. But Lana? She doubled down. She stormed into a stand-up meeting, jaw tight, voice sharp. "This is a scare tactic," she snapped. "She's bluffing. We are not stopping Vertex. The expo is in 10 days. We're going live." When no one spoke, she added the fatal line that would echo through the halls for months. Provisional patents aren't real patents. They mean nothing. Oh, Lana. In her world, confidence was armor and hesitation was weakness. In mine, overconfidence was evidence. The engineers tried rewriting critical modules to scrub any trace of my logic. They changed variable names, reformatted documentation, even swapped frameworks. But software isn't makeup. You can't just rebrand it and call it original. Every algorithmic branch, every fallback trigger, every nested decision tree still led back to me. The following week was chaos. Contractors quit mid-project. Product managers whispered about lawsuits. Someone leaked a screenshot of Eliza's cease and desist to a private tech Discord. Within hours, the post hit Tech Chronicle, a mid-tier industry site with just enough readership to cause damage. The headline read, "Former engineer claims ownership of Vertex codebase. NextVantage faces patent dispute." By dawn, reporters were emailing the company for comment. At 9 a.m., Lana walked into the office wearing a navy blazer-like armor. "We proceed," she told her team. "This expo will happen, and Vertex will shine." They should have known then, when a leader starts talking like a motivational poster. The ship's already sinking. 3 days before the expo, Sophie texted me. They're testing the demo nonstop. It keeps freezing. I smiled. I knew why. They were missing the Spectre protocol, the invisible logic engine that handled routing corrections and load failures. I'd never committed that module to any shared repository. It lived only in my private archive. Without it, the system couldn't self-balance. It would run fine for about 30 seconds, then choke on its own predictions. But they didn't stop. They couldn't. The booths were booked, the PR campaign launched, and investors were expecting fireworks. So, Lana pushed forward. The Northwest Tech Frontier Expo was held at the Seattle Convention Center. A sleek maze of banners, LED walls, and bad coffee. NextVantage's booth sat front and center, 3112, with a glowing logo, promo videos, and a 70-inch display preloaded with the Vertex simulation. The tagline read, "The future of predictive logistics starts here." Lana arrived early, all polished confidence and camera-ready smiles. Behind her trailed a small army of engineers and marketers who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Among them was Paul, my old junior dev, eyes sunken, hoodie wrinkled, carrying the demo laptop like a live grenade. He was the only one smart enough to be terrified. As the expo lights dimmed, an announcer took the stage. Please welcome one of the most visionary leaders in enterprise AI, Lana Mercer, Vice President of Innovation at NextVantage Systems. Applause. Spotlights. Cameras rolling. Lana stepped to the podium, launched into her pitch. She talked about scalability, disruption, transformation, all the buzzwords corporate execs use when they don't understand their own product. Then she smiled at the crowd. Now, let's see Vertex in action. The big screen came alive. A map of the U.S. shimmered into view, dotted with animated supply routes. Colored lines began to move, recalculating in real time. The audience leaned forward. For 20 seconds, it looked flawless. Then the screen hiccuped. One red warning box appeared. Then another. Then the entire interface froze. A system alert blinked in bold letters. Unhandled exception. Null routing reference. The murmurs started immediately. Paul rushed forward, fingers flying over the keyboard, whispering, "It's looping out. It can't find the fallback logic. Of course it couldn't. I'd removed it months ago." The simulation collapsed. The screen turned gray. Lana tried to laugh it off. "Looks like we're having some minor technical The microphone cut out mid-sentence. Somewhere in the crowd, an engineer's voice carried over the stunned silence. "We couldn't legally use the original code. It's flagged for IP conflict." And just like that, the illusion shattered. For 5 excruciating seconds, nobody breathed. Then the murmuring began. A low ripple that spread through the expo hall like a slow-motion explosion. Phones came out. Cameras turned. A journalist in the second row started recording. On stage, Lana froze, her lips parting, trying to summon something resembling control. The massive LED screen behind her still flashed the same red error. "Null root exception," one of the engineers whispered frantically into her headset. "We have to cut the feed." She ignored him. "We're just experiencing minor technical issues," she said, her voice trembling. "Live demos can be unpredictable." But it wasn't a glitch. It was a collapse. The Vertex system was dying in real time, every failed process tracing back to the missing module that only existed on my private archive. The audience knew it. The competitors across the aisle knew it. Hell, even the catering staff probably knew it. A slow clap of awkward sympathy began in the back row, the kind people give when they're too polite to laugh. The moderator stepped forward, mumbling something about unexpected hiccups in innovation. Lana forced a smile so tight it could have cracked glass. Backstage, chaos erupted. Paul yanked out the HDMI cable like it might bite him. Another engineer cursed under his breath, staring at the frozen laptop. "Half these functions are placeholders," he muttered. "The logic calls are empty." A contractor whispered, "We told her this would happen." The intern, God bless that poor girl, was crying in a corner, whispering, "I think I just watched a career die." Meanwhile, Lana paced in tight circles, her perfect hair falling out of place, eyes darting to her phone. She kept repeating, "We'll fix it. We'll fix it before the next demo." But there was no next demo. Vertex had imploded on its global debut, live streamed to an audience of potential investors and competitors who were now tweeting about it in real time. By the next morning, Vertex fail was trending on tech Twitter, and the real show hadn't even started yet. 2 days later, a meeting was scheduled in NextVantage's downtown conference suite. Lana sat at the center of a long U-shaped table, surrounded by the COO, 2 board members, and Karen Lewis from legal. The blinds were closed. The mood was surgical. Karen cleared her throat. "We've received another delivery," she said quietly, setting a thick manila envelope on the table. "From Cole and Trent Law." Lana rolled her eyes. "Let me guess. Another threat letter?" No one laughed. Karen opened the envelope. Inside were 3 documents, a spreadsheet, a notarized affidavit, and a USB drive labeled Audio, January 7th. Eliza Trent herself entered moments later, composed, uninvited, unstoppable. She walked straight to the head of the table, her heels clicking like metronomes. Without preamble, she said, "Ms. Cole sends her regards." Then she nodded at Karen. "Please, play the recording." Karen hesitated, then pressed play on her laptop. Lana's voice filled the room, unmistakable, crisp. "If you don't like the new policies, Aaron, you can just resign and go. Once it's in the system, it's ours. That's how it works." A silence thicker than concrete followed. The older board member with tortoiseshell glasses looked at Lana, expression unreadable. "Did you verify any of this before announcing Vertex?" Lana opened her mouth, closed it again. Eliza spoke evenly. "Ms. Cole's work was conducted off-site, on her own hardware, with third-party witnesses and notarized development logs. NextVantage holds no claim to her intellectual property." She slid another page forward. "A legal acknowledgement form. You'll want to sign this. It confirms cessation of all use of the infringing systems, retraction of prior claims, and acknowledgement of authorship by Miss Erin Cole." Karen read it twice. The COO stared at the table, pale. No one defended Lana. No one even looked her way. Finally, the board member sighed. "Draft the retraction," he said. It was over. Eliza gathered her documents, nodded once, and left the room. Lana didn't speak, didn't move. She just sat there. The same woman who once told me to resign and go, now trapped in a silence she'd built herself. By the following morning, NextVantage's board convened in the main conference suite at precisely 9 a.m. sharp. No press, no cameras, no optimism, just a lineup of tired executives staring down the aftermath of a corporate implosion. Lana's name wasn't on the invite list. Her office door remained locked downstairs, her ID badge still technically active but no longer trusted. The woman who once bragged about running the most innovative division in logistics tech was now sitting in HR with a company lawyer and a cup of cold coffee she couldn't bring herself to drink. Upstairs, the conversation was brisk and bloodless. The first motion: terminate Project Vertex. Not postpone, not rebrand, terminate. The vote was unanimous. The board understood there was no salvaging something built on stolen bones. Too many eyes were watching. Investors, journalists, even competitors waiting for a single misstep. Trying to fix Vertex would only lead them straight to court. The second motion came quieter but heavier. Revoke all administrative privileges associated with Vice President Lana Mercer, effective immediately. The CTO didn't even hesitate. He slid his tablet across the table, entered a command, and confirmed the deactivation. Somewhere down on the 12th floor, a soft chime probably echoed as her badge went dark. She wouldn't realize it until she tried to take the elevator. Then came the paperwork shuffle. Karen Lewis from Legal distributed a memo titled Intellectual Property Attribution Update, Vertex Logic Framework. Inside, it stated, without flourish, that the foundational code and architecture of the Vertex system had been traced to former employee Aaron Cole. The acknowledgement was dated, notarized, and signed by both legal and compliance. There was no PR spin, no emotional language, just certainty. And in corporate America, certainty is more powerful than any apology. 2 floors below, someone in communications was already updating the internal wiki. Another employee pushed a press draft to PR, filled with the usual corporate vagueness. NextVantage remains committed to ethical innovation and would like to thank all contributors for their dedication. Translation: we got caught, and we're trying to sound noble about it. But the real wildfire started outside those glass walls. A freelance tech journalist I'd spoken to weeks earlier, off the record, but with enough breadcrumbs, published an article before noon. The headline read, Former engineer outsmarts employer in patent dispute. How documentation toppled a flagship product. It spread fast. Tech blogs picked it up. Then the bigger outlets followed. My inbox turned into a fireworks show. Recruiters, venture investors, ex-colleagues, even competitors. Some messages were thinly veiled curiosity. Others were pure admiration. At 2:07 p.m., Sophie texted me just 2 words. You won. But I didn't feel victorious, just calm. Vindication doesn't arrive with champagne or applause. It arrives in silence, in the sound of executives realizing your name will outlast theirs. That afternoon, I left my phone at home and walked downtown. The November air was cold, but sharp, in a way that felt clean. I stopped by a corner cafe that always oversteeped their tea, bought a coffee instead, and sat on a park bench watching 2 squirrels fight over a fry. I thought about the years I'd spent being the quiet one in meetings, the fixer who patched other people's messes while they collected the credit, the invisible architect of stability. Not anymore. Somewhere across town, the same board that once erased my signature from slides was now retyping it into official records, in bold. The product they'd built on theft was dead. The VP who'd tried to own me was gone. And the system I'd designed, the one they mocked as too technical, was now the most talked about ghost in their servers. That evening, Eliza called. It's done, she said simply. The retraction's filed. They'll go public tomorrow. You're clean? Good, I said. Let's not celebrate yet. She laughed. Aaron, you don't need to. You already won. Maybe. But what I felt wasn't triumph. It was release. The weight was gone. I turned my phone face down, sipped my coffee, and whispered to no one in particular. Thanks for the exit strategy, Lana. The email came 2 days later. Subject line simple and polite. Invitation to discuss a strategic role, Viron Labs. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another recruiter fishing for gossip. But curiosity won. I opened it, read it once, then twice. Viron Labs wasn't a startup in the garage sense. It was lean, well-funded, and respected for doing one thing ruthlessly well, protecting and commercializing intellectual property. The message was from Daniel Holt, their founder. Ms. Cole, your recent work in autonomous logistics caught our attention. We'd like to discuss a position that aligns with your expertise and ownership principles. DH Ownership Principles. I smiled at that. Someone who understood the language of creators, not thieves. 3 weeks later, I stood in Viron's glass lobby, sunlight cutting through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off chrome and quiet ambition. The receptionist greeted me by name and handed me a sleek silver badge that read, Aaron Cole, Chief Patent Officer. I stared at it for a second before clipping it onto my blazer. It was lighter than I expected, but the weight of what it meant hit like a storm. Daniel met me in the elevator, early 40s, no tie, energy of a man who'd lived through a dozen product wars and learned when to fight quietly. He shook my hand, smiled, and said, "You built something people tried to steal. That means you built something worth owning." I nodded. "I just don't want anyone else making that mistake here. That's why we want you," he said, leading me down the corridor. "We don't build on other people's blueprints. We protect our own." My new office wasn't huge, but it was mine. A corner suite with a skyline view and the low hum of servers beneath the floor. On the desk sat a thin folder labeled Patent Protocol Initiative and a sticky note that said, "Welcome home." The first few weeks were a blur of NDAs, audits, and strategy sessions. My job was to set up an internal system that made sure no engineer, designer, or data scientist at Veron would ever go through what I did at NextVantage. Every innovation had to have proof of origin, time-stamped, verified, protected. I built my process like a fortress: clean documentation, redundant archives, dual author sign-offs, blockchain verification for core commits. Legal paranoia turned into policy. And for the first time in years, my ideas weren't treated as liabilities. They were infrastructure. At exactly 9 a.m., on my first official Monday, I opened my inbox to find 15 internal patent proposals waiting for review, each tagged "Awaiting CPO approval." My name, CPO Aaron Cole, glowed in the company directory. It felt real. Across town, NextVantage was still smoldering from its own collapse. Their PR team had tried to relaunch a scaled-down version of Vertex under a new name, RootIQ, but it was a ghost of what it once was. Stripped of everything I'd built, the platform buckled under its own dead weight. The engineers tried to resurrect it, but each time they ran the sandbox environment, errors exploded like fireworks. The load balancer refused to initialize. The back-end authentication kept failing. Hidden inside the dependency chain were digital fingerprints, code headers labeled Harlow Protocol, Cole Routing, V1, protected under my provisional filings. One poor engineer posted a message in their internal Slack. She wasn't bluffing. We built everything on her architecture. That message leaked within an hour. By afternoon, a new headline appeared on TechWire Daily. NextVantage retreats from RootIQ launch amid licensing concerns. No mention of me. No need. Anyone paying attention already knew. I read it from my new office, coffee in hand. Dark roast, oat milk, no sugar. The city hummed below. My reflection in the glass looked steady, composed, unbothered. I smiled and whispered to myself. They finally realized I was the product. Then I turned back to my monitor, opened a new patent file, and began typing. Because for the first time in my career, I wasn't building for them. I was building for me.